Welcome to Women in the Music Industry, the podcast that shines a spotlight on the remarkable women who are breaking barriers and making their mark in an industry that has long been dominated by men. I'm your host, Rob Wells, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this empowering journey. Each episode of this podcast will be dedicated to exploring the inspiring stories, accomplishments, and struggles of the extraordinary women who have defied the odds and made waves in the music business. Together, we'll delve into the journeys of female artists, songwriters, producers, musicians, managers, executives, and all those who have helped play a pivotal role behind the scenes. We'll uncover the stories that deserve to be heard, as well as celebrate the triumphs, challenges, and unique perspectives that women bring to the music industry. Whether you're a fan of music, an aspiring artist, or simply curious about the inner workings of the music business, this podcast will offer a valuable perspective. Together, we'll celebrate the power of music and the strength of these inspiring women. So join us as we amplify their voices and together pave the way for a future where women in the music business are no longer the exception, but the rule. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Songwriter's Piano, an easy-to-use app for songwriters and lyricists to use when coming up with song ideas when there's no instrument around or nobody to play one. With the Songwriter's Piano, one can easily play commonly used pop songwriting chord sequences at the touch of a screen, in any key, in 3 different chord variations, all played on a gorgeously recorded grand piano. Download the Songwriter's Piano by Play Like Me apps today, found on both iOS and Android stores everywhere. Welcome everyone to another episode of Women in the Music Industry. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the podcast. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. My guest today is none other than singer-songwriter and live sound legend, Joie. Joie is a compelling presence in the music industry, merging talents as a singer-songwriter with technical prowess in live sound. Their musical journey, which took a professional turn in 2022, is marked by a lifelong engagement with music, culminating in a multifaceted career that spans performing and live sound engineering. Interestingly, Joie hadn't initially considered a career in live sound. The decision came after a friend highlighted the need for greater diversity within the field, emphasizing the importance of representation for women, people of color, and LGBTQ+ individuals in Toronto's music scene as audio technicians. This insight propelled Joie to explore the technical side of music, aiming to fill the gap and bring a fresh perspective to the industry. Over the last year, Joie's work in live sound has taken them across Toronto, Canada, working in venues such as Rivoli, Burdock Brewery, and the Cameron House. If you don't know those places, if you've never been to Toronto, you definitely have to check them out because they're amazing.
Definitely.
Yeah. Their technical role complements their identity as a singer-songwriter, where they craft songs that weave personal narratives with universal themes resonating with a broad audience. Joie's transition into music and live sound engineering not only highlights their adaptability and dedication to their craft, but also positions them as an advocate for inclusivity within the music industry. Their story reflects a commitment to personal growth, diversity, and expression through music, making Joie a standout artist in Toronto's vibrant music community. Everyone, would you please give a very, very warm welcome to Joie?
Hi, thank you so much for that, Rob.
Oh, thank you, Joie, for being here. And it's so early in the morning too, but you're a trooper. You're here, and
yes,
you're ready.
I'm
and you're
super
rocking.
Excited for this.
I'm super excited too. Just as a little backstory before we get started, Shoba, my wife and I, we were doing a show. I think it was in November, and
I think so.
It was at the Burdock Brewery, which is sort of just west of downtown Toronto, and we show up and we're unpacking all of our gear, and we were the opening act for the show. And who do we meet but Joie? Joie comes up and introduces herself, and she is the nicest, kindest person. She says, "I will be taking care of sound tonight, live sound." And as soon as I met her, I just thought, "Oh my goodness, you would be amazing for the podcast."
Oh, that's so sweet.
But this was before you even went beyond that. So I have to tell you, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, Joy, but we had one of the best shows ever. And it's all because the sound was so good. For us up on stage.
That's too kind.
No, I'm serious. It was like it's such an important thing so that when you're performing on stage, that the sound on there to the performers feels really good, and they can hear themselves represented well. That they feel like, it's a little bit more extraordinary than what they would normally have in just a dead room. And then when I went out to hear the main act, the sound that was happening in that room in the Burdock was incredible. And it was really good. And not only that, Joy was very concerned about the way that everything looked on the stage. It wasn't just about how things sounded. It's how does it visually look? How does it represent who's playing? Where do you need to be seated? Are things in the way? There's so many live sound engineers that are out there that don't care about that sort of thing. And they're just like, yeah, whatever, just get up there and plug in and we'll basically do a sound check as you play live for the audience. Mm-hmm. So we just appreciated you so much. And any little question that we had for you, it was never a feeling of like, oh, would these people please stop, asking me questions. It was always just like really kind, really courteous. And you were more than happy to help out with anything. And I couldn't be more thrilled to have you here and feature you here and discover more about you and just how amazing you are. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Meeting you and your wife at that show was so nice. You guys were so easy to work with. And honestly, the sound had a lot to do with just like the awesome equipment at Burdock, but I try my best. But I was honored to be invited onto the show. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. More than happy that you're here. I feel like it was meant to be that we were supposed to meet,
Yeah, for sure.
And I think this is great because I haven't had a show yet talking about live sound. And it's a huge area of the music industry that is literally all around the world. There are live sound engineers everywhere, all around the world. And it's something that a lot of people don't think about as a career choice in the music industry, that they think of, performance, or they think about songwriting, or they think about production, or maybe getting into managing or whatever. But live sound is just so important. How many concerts go on every single day around the entire planet? Whether they're huge stadium concerts or whether it's down to performing in front of 6 people, in a tiny little gig and everything else in between. You need somebody there that really understands live sound. And I have to say, you are the first female live sound engineer that I have ever come across in my journey. I know of some others, but just working together, it was so refreshing. It was great. You just came at it from a completely different angle. And I just think more of that, please. More
yes,
of that.
We need more of that for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So Joy, I'm going to stop talking so much right now because I feel like I'm going on like a crazy broken record right now. But would it be possible? Can I learn more about you? Can I know about your journey? Like you wrote in your bio about, your friend suggesting that you dive into this area, but can we go beyond that? Can we go a little bit further back and just take me through everything? Your first, I want to talk about the singer-songwriter aspect as well, the artist side that you have going on, because they're all equally important. And I'm sorry if I'm putting a lot of, preference towards the live sound thing, but I'm equally interested in everything that you're doing. So
no problem.
I'll just let you take us back. I'm sure it's not too far because you're quite young.
So live sound is actually something that I've only been doing for just over a year now. So my life in music started way back, way before I started doing live sound. I started playing piano when I was about 4 years old. And that's where my love of music really started to blossom. I actually think that it was my older cousin that got me one of those little toy baby grand piano things for my birthday. I think maybe when I was about 4 years old. And my mom would tell me that I would just bang on the keys every single day, and just like I would just love playing this toy. So after she was sick of hearing just random noise coming from this toy from me, she decided to put me into music lessons. And I started doing just music lessons at the local music center, which they did like regular music, like pop music type stuff, but they also did Royal Conservatory lessons there.
Mm-hmm.
So I started off doing group lessons. And then after I showed a lot of passion for that at such a young age, my mom started putting me into Royal Conservatory. And that's where I started really practicing a lot more piano. Around the same age, I was also singing at like the local church choir that I would go to with my mom on the weekends. So from a very young age, I was just really in love with playing piano and singing. And then as I grew older, I continued with Royal Conservatory. I started doing competitions in the Kiwanis festivals at a young age. I think I started doing that around like 7 years old, and I did that until I was about 12 maybe. And that's when I started to get really kind of pressured by all of the competitions and all of the practicing, and it started to become very overwhelming for me. So I actually took a step back from music at that point. I told my mom that I didn't want to take lessons anymore, and I just wanted to focus on things that I wanted to do outside of music. So then when I got into high school, I was still playing piano for myself, not as much as I was. But I remember I wrote my first song in my grade 10 vocal class for an assignment. And when I wrote that song, I just absolutely loved the process of writing. I always admired people who could write their own music. But because I was practicing classical music for a majority of my life until that point, I had no idea how to tap into that creativity into my life, because all I knew was learning a piece, practicing that piece, and not straying from that. So when I wrote my first song, I was really in love with that. But that was also around the same time where, you know, teenagers are starting to think about what they want to do for the rest of their life. And I myself was kind of influenced by my family and some other people who told me that music may not be a viable option as a career, something that may not make a lot of money. So I also had a passion for science and health and helping people through the healthcare system. So I decided to dip into that. So moving forward into university, I actually stopped playing music and stopped singing altogether and was just focusing on music. Wow. I went to U of T for life science, and it was a really hard program. And I realized very quickly that because I gave up that really big part of my life of music, I just became really depressed and really unmotivated with what I was doing. And so when I realized that, I actually decided to join an a cappella group at my university. And I started meeting some of the music students at U of T, and I became friends with some of the people in the a cappella group. And that's when I realized, oh my God, I need music in my life. There's no other choice. I need it. Yeah. Like I can't just ignore that part of me. It's like a part of me that I just really need to have. So that was when I was around maybe like 19 years old. And when the pandemic came around, I had a lot of time to myself at home, and I was really contemplating where I wanted to move forward in life. I think everyone had a lot of time to think about what they wanted to do around that time. So then I made a very bold decision to leave my life science program at U of T and pursue a career in music. So that was at the very beginning of the pandemic. I completed my second year at university at U of T, and I decided I didn't want to go back. During the pandemic, I did decide to apply to Seneca for the independent music production program. Mm-hmm. And I started that in 2021, and it was fantastic. I met so many friends that I still stay in contact with now. That program is fantastic. It basically teaches you all the foundational skills of songwriting, production, music engineering, and even like music business that you need to be a independent musician, which I was very grateful for. And all the professors there were amazing, and all my classmates were awesome. But because it was during the pandemic, everything was through Zoom. So it was kind of a weird experience of doing a program virtually and not actually going to the campus.
Yeah.
But I did finish that during the pandemic. And by the time I was finished that program was when the pandemic was starting to kind of get a little bit lighter. The laws and stuff about going out was starting to lift. So that's when I decided to go and move back to downtown Toronto, because I figured I wanted to be in the downtown core so that I could meet more musicians, really surround myself in Toronto's music industry so that I can move forward with that. So I moved back to Toronto, and I didn't actually end up really getting more active in the music industry other than seeing some of my friends' shows and collaborating with some of my friends until a year later. So we're talking like 2022 now. And that's when my friend approached me, Julia Little. She's an amazing sound tech. She works at so many venues, and she's actually one of my mentors for who was teaching me to learn all of this. So she approached me one day and she told me like, hey, if you want to make a little extra money, like there's a lot of venues around Toronto that really are looking for more sound techs, and we really need more representation in the music industry for sound techs that are women, people of color, and also identify in the LGBTQ community. So I was like, you know what? I might as well give it a try. If I have someone that's willing to teach me and willing to kind of open that door for me, there's no harm in trying. And if I get a little bit of extra pocket money, then why not?
Of course.
Exactly. So I was shadowing for a few months with Julia Little. And through that, it kind of just was like opportunities just kept coming to me in terms of live sound. I kept meeting more people because there was a high demand for sound techs in Toronto for Toronto venues. I was getting opportunities that was just falling into my lap, and I would be an idiot to not take them. So that's kind of how I started doing live sound. Along the side of that, I was also still writing my own music and collaborating with friends and, going to my friends' shows and all of that. I haven't done any shows of my own yet, but I will be soon, and I will be releasing a single soon in March. But as of right now, I've just been writing for myself and doing live sound on the side as well. And
That's
it's
amazing.
been a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. That's great. What was it like going out and doing your first live sound gig on your own?
It was actually terrifying because for the longest time I was shadowing Julia and also my other mentor, Alex, who mainly works at the Baby G in the West End. And both of them are amazing, fantastic sound techs. Like they're just so much ahead of like where I am right now. They just are so honed in their skills. So I was shadowing them for the longest time. And then I actually got my first solo sound gig because the owner of the Junction Underground, also in the West End, was looking for a sound tech last minute, and they just really needed someone. So I work at Long and McQuaid, and he actually reached out to the manager of the rental department at Long and McQuaid and was like, is there anyone there that can do the sound? Like, please, like, help me out. So she came to me and was like, hey, I heard that you're learning to do sound. Would you be open to doing this? And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm ready, but if if you say that you think I'll be okay and like you're showing me the equipment that I'll use and I feel okay using it, then why not? So my first sound gig was actually at a venue that I've never been to before and with equipment that I've never used in a live sound setting.
Wow.
But it was just a small little analog board. I can't remember what it was, but because it was an analog board, I figured it would be super easy because up until then I've been shadowing my mentors with digital boards, which are so complicated, and I still didn't really understand how to operate them at that point. But I knew the basics and I knew I could apply that to a very simple small analog board. So I went to the show and I did the sound, and the owner was obviously very grateful that I came in last minute. And the bands that I did the sound for was like, "Hey, you did a great job. It sounded great. All the bands sounded really great, and they were super appreciative." And it definitely gave me more confidence to put myself out there and get more sound gigs for myself, and be more confident to take these opportunities that were coming to me. So it was kind of like just taking a leap of faith, even though I didn't know what was going to happen and I wasn't sure in myself if I could really do it. But it turned out really well. And I ended up working at that venue, the Junction Underground, for a very long time. And I still work there now. And that's pretty much my home base, like where I
That's
started
so
out and grew.
great. That's so great. I love that you say yes and figure it out later.
Yep. That's that's pretty much how I've learned everything when it comes to my music.
Amazing. Let me ask, at the Seneca program, do they cover live sound? Do they go
They
through anything
do
like that?
actually. So there was one course for live sound, um, but because it was all through Zoom, it was very hard to learn the stuff that the professor was teaching because he had all of the equipment in his home and he was trying his best to really show us how to operate this equipment. And he was teaching us how to tune a room with like a full graphic EQ. But because it was through Zoom and there was a little bit of lag, and like obviously Zoom audio isn't always the
It's
best
horrible.
audio,
Horrible.
it was really, really difficult to learn through that course through Zoom. I still learned a lot of really great tips. But at that time, at that moment in time when I was in that course, I thought to myself, I'm never going to do live sound. Like, I'm not going to use this information. It's fine if I don't get it now. And then a few months later, I end up getting into it. And I'm like, oh, man, I wish I paid more attention to this course.
But it's over Zoom. It's so difficult. It's
Yeah.
I was just talking to my brother this past weekend just about different situations in classrooms and how they can really affect you. I was in grade 10 science, and we were taught in a classroom and reading out of textbooks, and I couldn't have been more bored. I love science now. I'm a huge science geek, but I failed grade 10 science just because I was bored to tears and I didn't apply myself at all. Off I
Mm-hmm.
got shipped to summer school, and during summer school, it was one of the hottest summers of any year that I could think about in my
Mm-hmm.
childhood. And the teacher was so cool. They said, you know what? It's too hot in this classroom. Let's all leave the classroom. There's a river down the way by the school. Let's go down by the river and go into the shade of a tree.
Oh,
And
that's
I'm
so cool.
and taught the entire summer school course of science, grade 10 science, by the river in the shade of the tree, and using real world examples to show us physics and optics.
Wow.
And I got like a 98 in that. Just there's such a difference in
That's
environments.
amazing.
And just
Yeah.
when you're learning over Zoom, it's so hard. It's so hard but I'm amazed that you finished your program on Zoom, just because Zoom is just impossible to learn so many things, especially live sound.
Mm-hmm.
I do something here when I'm on Zoom. So you see my setup behind me, but in front of me, I have a mixer that's right over here, and I have an audio interface over here. So what I do is I plug every single thing, my microphone, this keyboard in front of me, the two other keyboards, the output of my laptop, which is right in front of me. I plug all of that into my mixer, and I set up the levels right there so that I
Mm-hmm.
can then hear everything coming through in my headphones. But then I take the output of my mixer, the stereo output, and put that into the input of my audio interface.
Mm,
And then when I'm on Zoom, I broadcast in stereo, and
mm-hmm.
everybody can hear everything really well on Zoom. If anyone's wanting to have sessions online or anything, it's such a great way to do this without having to purchase extra software in order to run a session and have everybody hear it. You can literally just
Absolutely.
run Zoom. You can share your screen to show your DAW, whatever you're using, and then
Mm-hmm.
all the stereo sound comes out of the mixer. It goes into the audio interface, and that becomes
Yeah.
the audio device that Zoom uses. So
Yeah.
I don't know if they were doing that, if they were just using the mic of the computer to pick up the sound in their room for teaching live sound, or I don't know.
Oh, for the live sound course, I think it was just the microphone coming from the computer, but
No.
all the other professors, specifically the professors that were teaching us how to use Pro Tools and how to do like sound engineering and mixing for our own mixes, they were using like very elaborate setups with their microphone and their interface. So it was very good audio quality with that. And there was a program, I can't remember what it's called now, but when they were teaching us on Pro Tools, they used a separate program so
Audio
that there
movers,
was
maybe?
no, I think it was something like that. That sounds very familiar. It might have been that, so that there wasn't any latency and the audio was fantastic. But unfortunately for us, the live sound course wasn't taught with those programs or
It was a little
interfaces or
too live.
anything. It was a little too live, yeah. But I don't blame him because I mean he's a live sound guy, so I wouldn't expect him to have a lot of studio stuff. But it was a little bit difficult learning live sound through there. But it was helpful what information I could get from that course.
Yeah, at least you had a taste of it, right? And just even though you thought I'm never going to do live sound, you still had that knowledge in there somewhere
Yes,
that you could apply some
absolutely.
of that when you got out there. So another thing that I'm curious about is just you have such limited time when you go into a venue. You have to go in and you have to see what gear they have, what you're working with, how many mics are there, how many stands, how many, what are all the connections? What's the snake situation like? What's
Mm-hmm.
the board like? Is it digital? Is it
Mm-hmm.
analog? How many bands are there? What kind of music is it? How many people are we expecting? What's the size of the room? Like this,
So many factors.
it's probably like I'm probably just scratching the surface as to all the things you have to think about, right? Because even when you do sound check with a band or with a singer and a guitar or keyboard or whatever, the sound, correct me if I'm wrong, but would the sound not be entirely different when the room is empty to when the room is filled with people? And do you have to account for
Absolutely.
that as well?
That is absolutely correct. So, oftentimes when I'm doing sound check with a band, if I know that it sounds very different when the room is filled versus when it's empty at that specific venue, then I tell the band, like, hey, don't worry about the sound. It's going to sound different when there's people in here. And oftentimes, what I do is I do the sound check and I make sure it sounds good, all things considered, with the room empty. And then when the room starts to fill up, that's when it starts to get really important to mix like the first few songs to the room with the people in the room. So I'm really grateful because majority of the venues in Toronto have digital boards these days. So that being said, you can hook up a tablet to the board, to digital boards, and you can move around the room with your tablet and make sure that it sounds good at all points of the room.
Wow.
So that is really, really useful. I think when I had met you at Burdock, I was using the tablet during sound check.
That's right.
Um, And it's really useful as well because I don't have to be all the way back in the booth to do sound check while you guys are on stage. I can like get up there and, talk to you guys, see what it sounds or hear what it sounds like from your perspective, like from the monitors, with me a little bit closer to the stage.
Yeah.
And I can talk to you and be like, hey, does this sound good? Do you need anything? All that kind of stuff without having to like scream from the booth or like have to talk in a talk back mic, which is a little bit more impersonal than if I were up there with you. So I'm really grateful for the technology for that. And it also makes my job a lot easier.
Oh, absolutely. The technology has come such a long way, and it really does make a huge difference, especially when you're on stage and we can just have a normal conversation without raising our voices and trying to yell back and forth to where you are. And then you can hear exactly what we're talking about as well. Like if there's a buzz or if there's not enough reverb or anything like that, then
Exactly.
you can hear that right away. Joy, I'm curious, can you take me through, just take me through a day of your life when you are doing live sound? Well, first of all, is there an agency that you belong to for live sound, or are you just sort of like a pool of people that get called? Or how does somebody find, if somebody needs a live sound engineer, where do they go first to make that call and say, I need someone for this venue and I'd really love to have somebody that is great at this or whatever? How does that happen?
Absolutely. So I do freelance work for live sound. And a lot of my gigs come through just networking. So and my mentors, when I was starting out, they would tell me a lot about gigs that needed sound techs, and I would find out through them. And just through doing more work, I was able to meet more sound techs, and everyone's kind of connected in terms of freelance sound techs. So whenever someone needs a gig covered, like sometimes I'll just like post on my story on Instagram or something and be like, hey, me or someone that I know needs this gig covered. Is anyone interested? So that's one really interesting way that people get sound gigs and get their gigs covered. There are people who are unionized and part of groups, but that's more for bigger events and like bigger corporate stuff. I personally am not part of a union, but I have spoken to some people about it. And it does seem like a great option if you're looking to do it full time, and you want a little bit more job security. And that's something that I have considered, because I have considered doing live sound full time. But at the moment, I'm only doing it as a freelance thing, aside from my full time job. But there are lots of different options. But in terms of me, myself, a day in a life of my sound gigs, for the venues that I work at frequently, they'll have a schedule for the month. And then they'll ask you like, hey, can you do these dates? And then I'll tell them like, yes, I can do these dates. And then I would say that would be majority of my gigs throughout the month. And that's like a month to month schedule. So that's what I mean about like more job security. It's a little bit scary to be a full-time sound tech, because a lot of these venues only do like month to month schedules, and your schedule is always changing. So you don't know if next month you're going to have 10 shows to go to or 15 shows to go to, or if you're only going to have 4. It's a little bit scary, which is why I haven't kind of taken the leap of faith into doing it full time.
Yeah.
But that's what my experience personally has been for doing live sound freelance. So since shows are in the evening, it's very fortunate for me to be able to have a full-time job and then do that in the evenings. So usually I'll show up to the venues after my full day of work at my full-time job, and then I'll show up at the venue and set up if I have time to set up before load in for the bands and musicians and whoever's going to be there to perform. and then you pretty much just get right into it. Oftentimes, I don't have a lot of time to set up before the load in of the acts for the night, just because I do have a full-time job. So I don't have that luxury of showing up early and setting up beforehand. And also, a lot of venues that I work at, they may or may not have like a stage plot ready or anything like that. So it's really like a job where you're going on the fly and you're just really going with whatever is thrown at you.
Do you ever get a warning like saying, here's who's coming in, here's the band, here's the instruments that they're bringing in, here's the inputs that they need, the amount of DIs? Do you ever get that sort of heads up, or is it ever just like a complete surprise when people show up?
Absolutely. So I, for the shows that I've been doing now, I've been fortunate enough to get that information. So, example at Burdock, and at Rivoli, they'll be really good at getting information from the acts beforehand so that we have more time to prepare. But when it comes to smaller bars and venues, when you're doing sound there, oftentimes you just show up and you just ask them what it is there, and you kind of have to come up with your own stage plot, or you have to ask them when they're there, how they want things to be set up. So when I was starting out at Junction Underground, that was very much how it was like, and I'm actually pretty grateful for that, because it's been able to get me to practice, having to come up with solutions in my head for certain things. If I don't have enough microphones for a certain act, what should I prioritize? So starting out at Junction Underground, where I didn't get the stage plot beforehand, really helped me to be able to be more organized and work better under pressure for like the future gigs and like the stuff that I'm doing now. But when you're working at small venues, oftentimes you just show up and you ask them, hey, how many microphones do you need? What instruments are you bringing? Can I mic that for you? I will try.
Mm-hmm. And on average, 2 acts a night, or would you have 3, or is it sometimes more? Do you ever have nightmare situations where it's like an all-nighter and it goes 6 bands playing for half an hour each, or anything like that?
I have never done 6 bands, thank God. But
Okay.
at Junction Underground, I think they average about 3 or 4. So it really depends on like the venue that you're working at. So at Rivoli, I think they do an average of 3. At Burdock, they do 2 or 3, depending on the night. I know they do shorter shows there sometimes. So sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's just 1. So it really depends on the venue and their kind of style of shows that they do there. But also at Rivoli, I've been doing a lot of their late night shows there. So because I work full time, I'm unable to show up for the earlier like band shows. So I've just been offering my services for the later shows, which are DJ parties usually. So that goes from, I have to show up at 9:30, and then that goes until 2:30, and then I pretty much leave at 3 a.m. So I work a full day at my like day job,
No.
and then I show up at Rivoli, and then I work until like 3 a.m. But I don't mind doing those gigs because it is a DJ night party type thing. I pretty much just set up the DJ equipment, make sure everything's okay, and then I don't have to do as much work as if I were doing like mixing for a band or anything. So it's a little bit lighter in terms of the work. I'm still there the entire night and making sure everything runs smoothly, making sure the compression and everything is still working so that we don't blow the speakers and monitors. Mm-hmm. But it is tough doing late night gigs and also working a full-time job.
Showing up at 9 a.m. the next day to do your full-time job. Wow, that's hard.
Exactly.
No thanks for me. I not at my ripe old age. I can't do those sort of hours anymore. It's I remember my grandparents going to sleep at 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve one year. And I was like, I used to call them Nanny and Grandpa. That was their names. And I was like, Nanny and Grandpa, why are you going to bed at 10? And they looked at me and they said, one day you'll understand. One day you'll.
Yep.
I've definitely reached that age where I'm just like, bed sounds great. That sounds really, really good.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I'm like the late night shows are starting to get to me where whenever I'm not doing a show, I'll just want to be at home and just relaxing because I'm like, if I don't have to be out, I just want to stay home.
Yes,
I feel like I've gotten to that age where being at home sounds really nice.
Absolutely. So one thing that I'm curious about is just you're in loud environments all the time. You're in clubs, you're in bar situations, you're in big rooms, small rooms, quiet singer-songwriters, loud rock bands, DJs, everything. What do you do to protect your ears? Because obviously you need to be listening to everything intently. You need your ears. You can't really have something that's muffling your ears and getting rid of frequencies in there. How do you protect your ears and make sure that you can do this for a long time?
For sure. Yeah. Because hearing is so important for the job as a sound technician. I try to use earplugs as much as possible because I do want to prevent like early hearing loss. I know a lot of people who have been doing sound for 20, 30 years and they've completely lost a lot of like the top end of their hearing. So to try to prevent that, I use musician grade earplugs. So they're specifically used to protect your hearing, but the audio quality is still fantastic. You can still hear everything as it would be with minimal like frequency reduction in terms of how it sounds with the earplugs on versus how it sounds without it. But the thing is, it's obviously going to sound a little bit different, at least a little bit different with the earplugs on. So what I tend to do is I will mix and do everything without the earplugs. So I'll do sound check without earplugs. I'll do maybe the first one or two songs without earplugs so that I know what it sounds like with my ears. And then I'll put them back on when I feel like I don't need to be as worried about the mix. So when it comes to mixing for like really loud bands like metal bands or like hardcore like rock punk bands or something like that, they definitely tend to be a lot louder. And something that I never really considered is it actually tends to be a lot louder in smaller venues than larger venues because the sound is bouncing off the walls a lot more. You're in a smaller room, so the sound is just building up in the smaller area. So when I do work in smaller venues, I really try to be attentive to bringing my earplugs and making sure I'm wearing them as much as I can. But there are times where I do need to take off my earplugs even after I've taken them into my ears just to make sure that they sound good. Because when you do mix with earplugs, it tends to sound very, very flat because of how it sounds with the earplugs in your ears. But that's just something to take into consideration. So what I usually do is just mix, make sure it sounds really good, and then put the earplugs in. And if they play a song that is a little bit different or the dynamics is a lot different from their previous songs or the songs that they did during sound check, then I'll take them out briefly, make sure they sound good, and then put them back in so that I'm trying to save my hearing as much as possible.
Wow. Yeah, I use musicians earplugs as well. They're amazing. Everything that mine drop everything down by 30 decibels. And it's fantastic because I could be at anywhere, just a loud party or whatever, and I pop them in because inevitably there's somebody that's right beside you that's like, hey, have you know, whatever, they're yelling right in your ear. And I remember coming home after those parties and just my ears would just be ringing. And now when I've got these things in, it sounds like the person's just having a normal conversation with me, even though they're yelling right in my ear. And it's fantastic. It's great. There's actually a picture of me somewhere. I was at a writing camp in Barbados, And one night they all said, let's go out to the club. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And like they dragged me out, and I was so tired. I fell asleep in the club as I pretty much right beside the speaker, and
Oh
with
my
all this
God.
crazy loud music playing, but I was wearing my musician's
Your
earplugs.
earplugs.
And so I'm like passed out, just having a great old snooze, man. And somebody took a picture of me, just like drool
That's
coming down onto the table.
hilarious. Oh my
Yeah. But
God.
that's the joy of those, that you can
Yeah,
hear everything really, really precisely. I'm surprised. Maybe there is something now. I don't know. Is there such a thing as like headphones that you can use right now that would sort of isolate what's happening outside, and you could just sort of hear a representation of where it would be in different areas of the club or anything like that? Some sort of modeling software that would be there to sort of simulate what the sound would be?
that seems like something that we should have, but I haven't heard of anything like that in particular. I know a few sound techs that will actually use in-ear monitors to mix. So a lot of boards, they have headphone outputs. So they'll just plug in their in-ear monitors into the headphone out so that they can mix with those. And I know a few sound techs who have been doing it for a very long time, and they purely mix off of their in-ear monitors. It's more of a preference thing, I would say. And I think it might depend on the genre of music that you're mixing at that specific show as well.
Sure.
But I would say if you're mixing with in-ear monitors, it would be good to just pop them out for a little bit, hear what it sounds like without the headphones on, and then you can put them back in. Because the good thing about in-ear monitors is because they're in your ear, it does block out majority of the sound, but you're still getting a really clear mix of what it sounds like. But the only problem with that is you're getting the sound directly from the board, as if instead of it coming out of the speakers, it's just going into your headphones.
Right.
So that can be really helpful for protecting your hearing, where you can keep them in for a little bit longer, but it might give you a little bit of a misrepresentation of how it sounds in the room for everyone else that's there.
Well,
So
that's just it, because the other instrument that we're not talking about is the bounce in the room. Is the room, how that adds to the overall sound. And when you're just listening to the direct mix from the board, you're hearing, for example, an acoustic guitar, you would just be hearing the way that it sounds coming through the cable directly to the DI in order to come to the board, and you're not hearing any of the natural space reverb that would be happening in the room, and you don't know whether you should add more or less or anything like that. So yeah, that would be good to take them off and to, or at least get used to the way that things sound out there, and then, oh, if that's how it sounds out there, I know in my in-ears how they should sound.
absolutely.
So, interesting.
Yeah.
And do you, because I know lighting is another component to any venue. There's not always somebody there that's dealing with the lights. It's usually just one person that's there doing the live sound and then doing the lights. Do you get involved in that at all? Do you have to change any sort of lighting cues at all, or do you set things up if the bands want certain colors or anything? Yeah.
Yeah, so lighting is something that is really nice to have, but not all venues have. So when it comes to lighting, majority of the venues will have some sort of like DMX controller or some sort of like lighting mixer right beside the sound mixer in the sound booth. I personally am really bad at doing lights. I've tried it a few times, but I realized that it looks a lot better if I just set it and then keep it like that for like the one act, and then maybe change it for the next act. I know a few people who do sound where they'll do a really great job at, like changing the lights, like when the dynamics change or when like the vibe of the song changes, they're going to be changing the lights. That becomes really, really entertaining for the people who are there and also for the band, because it gives them a better like feeling. It kind of lets them to also feel how their performance is kind of being projected to the people who are watching just through the lights. So it's a really nice thing to have. Some people are great at it. people like me aren't very good at it. But it is one detail that tends to get looked over sometimes. But when I have the chance to, I try to make the lighting as good as possible. So, for example, at Burdock, they have a really simple light setup there, but it's really effective. So, what I'll usually do is if I have time during sound check, I'll set the lighting depending on the vibe of the band. And something that the house tech there, Ethan, had just taught me recently when I was shadowing him, like I think last week or something. One really good way to really gain control of the room and the audience is using lighting. So if you're doing a show and the audience is particularly chatty and not very attentive. One thing that he taught me at Burdock was you can set the house lighting in between acts as a certain light, and then before the act starts, then you'll dim the house lights, turn the stage lights down, and then turn on the colored lights for the specific act. And that really, really helps to gain control over the attention of the audience, because a lot of people will use the dimming the lights cue as like, oh, I need to pay attention now. So that's one thing that I honestly haven't really thought of until Ethan at Burdock had told me about it. And it's really effective.
Wow. Wow. So cool. I know there's a lot that goes into every show, right? It's just so many different aspects. I didn't even think about just controlling the audience and how much they're paying attention to what's going up on stage and how much they're just sitting there talking, because you want the audience to really, enjoy. You want the people that have paid money to come in and hear this band to really hear the band and not hear everybody talking as well. So
absolutely.
that's very important as well. Amazing. I was also thinking, like, you moved back to Toronto to be involved in music and get to meet as many people as possible. I think this would be such a great way to meet so many musicians, so many artists, so many songwriters, so many producers. You and I met through this. It would be so easy because you instantly get a connection with them right away. You're working with them. They get a vibe for you. And if you really like who's up there performing and you really like their style of songwriting, their style of working, you can tell what kind of personality they have right away. I would think that would be such an in for you to find great co-writers, to find great collaborators to work with, way more than going and seeing your friends play at certain venues or whatever.
Absolutely.
You're right in there with all the people that are working really hard and trying to make their own careers going on. And then you can in turn take that, find collaborators to help work on your own project as well. I think that's such a win-win for you being in that situation.
Exactly. Yeah. That's one thing that I kind of overlooked when I started doing sound. I didn't realize how many people that I would get connected with. It's part of the job. Obviously, you're meeting so many people, you're hearing so many different genres and meeting all walks of life. But I've definitely gained a lot of opportunities purely through doing sound. So when I'm doing sound, I get to meet the band. I really get to see how they're like, how they vibe. And it's brought a lot of opportunities for me and also for like the people around me. So I know like in times where I've met a band that I really liked, I'll connect with them through social media or I'll get their number. And I've actually ended up being called to do sound for them personally at their own shows, which is always really awesome because you always get that like warm, fuzzy feeling when someone's like, hey, I loved what you did. Like, I want you to come back and do that for us. And it's always really nice. And I get to meet lots of people, like even people from outside of Toronto. Like I've done so many shows where a band on the bill was actually from the States or from a different province. And it's really, really cool being able to connect with all these people. And also it's really great because I like to not only connect myself with these people, but I also like to connect the people in my inner circle and the people around me with those people if it's something that I don't think I can particularly make use of. So there are some bands that I'll meet and I'll get along with them, but even though I get along with them, my first thought is to instantly connect them with one of my friends or one of these people that I've worked with. Or if they say that they need, that they're looking to record their next project, but they don't really know where they want to do that, but they liked how I mix, then I'll recommend them to one of my friends that works in a studio. And I'm like, hey, if you get along with me, you're going to get along with my friend. And honestly, I feel like building connections in the music industry is so important, especially as a woman and a person of color in the music industry. I'm always trying to connect my friends and like my other friends who are women and people of color or in the LGBTQ community with each other, so that we can kind of build each other up and get more opportunities with each other. It's really nice.
Amen. Bring that on, please, please, please. I'm hoping for that world to happen right now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Joy, I want to be respectful of your time. And I love to end these podcasts with giving you an opportunity to give some advice to the next generation that's coming up. Somebody that is thinking about the music industry. Maybe they have only thought about performance, or maybe they've only thought about songwriting. Maybe they've never thought about live sound or sound tech or anything like that. Just anything off the top of your head, any bits of advice that you would have for anybody that's thinking about getting in and becoming the next Joy.
Yeah, for sure. My piece of advice would be to just be open to trying new things, open to any opportunities that come your way, and also open to meeting new people. So I personally have never thought that I would be a sound tech, but the opportunity came my way and I took it, and it's brought so many opportunities to me in live sound and also in other areas. So my advice would be just go out there, see what you can get in terms of opportunities. And even if you don't think you can do it, still try. If you're scared to do it, still try it. If you feel like you're not ready, still try. And I know as a woman and as a person of color and someone who identifies as someone in the LGBTQ community, it can be intimidating to work in an industry that is very dominated by men. Don't let that discourage you. You're going to be working with a lot of men, but that just gives you an opportunity to put yourself out there and show people that you are entirely capable of being in this industry, and that we need more people like you in this industry, and that diversity and inclusion is something that we need to make this industry a more inclusive and a happier and a more vibrant industry. So keep yourself out there. Don't be afraid to try new things, and never give up. Don't be discouraged.
Wow. I've like almost tears welling up right now. That was, I will follow you to the ends of the earth, Joy. That was great.
That's so sweet. Oh, thank you.
You just wrapped up everything that I believe in as well. And just, oh, it's great. You're such a great human being and a great example of just what it takes to get out there and say yes and figure it out later. You know, just all of that. I can't thank you enough for being here and being on this podcast. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy we got to do this.
You're so cool. You're so kind. You're so talented. You're so driven. I wish you nothing but the best. And I would like to request you the next time and every time that we go out and perform live, if that's possible to do.
Amazing. Yeah, I would love to. Love to.
Okay. And where can people find you online? Are you on Instagram?
Yes, I'm on Instagram at Earth2Joy. So Earth TOJOIE. And you can find me on there.
Nice. Amazing. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Stay tuned for the next episode of Women in the Music Industry, coming soon. Let's embark on this incredible journey together, celebrating the women who are reshaping the music business one note at a time. If you enjoyed hearing this podcast, please take a moment and give it a like, a rating, or a follow. Your support helps immensely. We'll see you next time.